We're going to talk today about our tips for cross-curricular coding. So I'm super excited that everyone's joining us today, hopefully looking to learn about how you can incorporate coding into different subject areas. Maybe you're teaching science or math or art. We're really excited that you're here to learn about cross-curricular coding today. So my name is Lauren. I'm the marketing lead here at Unruly Studios. We're the creator of Unruly Splats. Feel free to follow us on Twitter if you're interested in learning a little bit more about us. And I'm joined today by Christine Danhoff. Christine, why don't you give us a little intro about yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm the pre-K to 12 technology integration specialist at Genoa area local schools, which is just a small district in Northwest Ohio. And I've had some experience in the classroom, but absolutely love what I get to do now because I get to work with awesome educators as well as the students. So feel free to follow me on Twitter as well. And I put a link to my website there. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And Christine actually found out about us through a Twitter contest that we ran last year, or maybe it was this year. And so we're also friends on Twitter. Join us on Twitter. All right, so this is us. And before we get started, I think we're going to dive into some key terms throughout the webinar so that everybody's sort of on the same page about what the difference is between all these terms. And I know some of these ones were new to me as well. So Christine, did you want to kind of walk us through these?
Absolutely. So when we talk about computer science and coding, a lot of teachers will say, well, I don't know that background at all. So just to give you a little background on what these terms are, when you see CS, that stands for computer science. And that is just the study of the principles and use of computers. So you're looking at how they work and how they are, going through their processes and such. When we talk about coding, which is a very big buzzword, of course, this week with the Hour of Code, we're talking about a programming language. So it's giving that machine a set of instructions of what to do and follow through so that way it can perform something. I always tell the kids that I work with, little ones, of course, that coding is you are the brains for the computer. You're telling it exactly what it needs to do. It doesn't know how to follow out that process unless you give it the directions. So we're taking a look at coding there. And then from there, the most important part is the computational thinking that is taking place. And that's when you are thinking and you're solving problems like a computer scientist. It's also going through, figuring out the solutions of that critical thinking process that we always hear so often that is so important for students to have. So it's just a different way of thinking when you're involving computers and coding into that. Then the word algorithms is one that you probably will hear quite a bit because that is actually the set of steps that you're giving the computer to perform a task. So we'll show some examples later, of course, so that way you can exactly see what an algorithm would look like. And you may be surprised when you see some of these beginning algorithms and how they can be introduced for littlest kids pre-K all the way up to adults, Then from there, we talk about sequencing. So sequencing is really no different than when we talk about story sequencing. It is actually taking that list of steps from the algorithm, but putting them in a certain order. So you have to carry out that task in a certain order in order to have it perform. And then the last one there is called debugging. Debugging is that part where you're going through and finding out how you can fix a problem. So we always are teaching kids, fail forward. If something doesn't work, do we give up? No, we try again, we work through it, we talk through it until we can find a solution to that problem then.
Absolutely. Thanks, Christine, for going through those terms. That's super helpful. I know one that I often would get caught up with was the difference between computer science and coding, but I think that you put that really well. So diving in, sort of why is cross-curricular coding a priority right now? I know it's besides the fact that it's our code. I know sometimes that's the only time that students will get a chance to do coding, but in a more general sense, now, during this year, this time, this moment, why should it be a priority?
Absolutely. No matter what your situation is, and I think everyone, wherever they are across the world, it looks a little different. You may be in class with students, you may be half your kids, you may have kids that you're all remote and you're working from home. So all those different things, it doesn't make a difference where we are. But the great thing about coding is it's a whole separate language that you're teaching your students. So just like we start by teaching young kids the alphabet and learning letter sounds and putting them into words, that's the same thing as coding. It's just a separate language. But what's really awesome about it is it's not necessarily another thing. And that's, sometimes we hear that, oh, I can't do another thing with this. But what's great about it is it can be integrated into so many different subjects. And what is really important too is giving your students this opportunity. We were having a little conversation before this got started tonight, and there is a small percentage of schools or districts that even offer a computer science class. And it's really awesome to see that when it does become a priority, the kids that are involved in it and all the different skills that they're learning through this for their future, which is really awesome.
Yeah, and we were also talking earlier about how it's important not just for students who want to go into computer science, which I love that you mentioned this, but also just for students who are going into completely other areas of work. It doesn't really matter, just understanding how a computer works is as important today as understanding how your own body works. And, because we have computers, our phones in our hands every day, and students are using iPads and computers for school. So it's just important, I think, to understand how the world around you works, regardless of whether or not your students are going to continue to pursue computer science as a career. But I thought that was
absolutely correct. Yeah.
And so you mentioned you're sort of a technology integration specialist, so you're working with a lot of different teachers. What subjects have you seen incorporated with computer science, and what kinds of teachers do you work with?
Definitely. So all the different subjects that are out there, basically, we've incorporated computer science into language arts, into mathematics, into science, into social studies, and even into some of those other areas such as PE. Music can be involved in that. And it's really awesome with my job that I absolutely love is that aspect of being able to co-teach with teachers and let them see that, hey, these are your core standards. And we can find a way to integrate computer science and coding with these activities. And the kids don't even know it. And it's just really a nice way to cover those different subjects and get the kids excited about it.
Awesome. I think you have an example here, which I'll move to next.
Absolutely. So, I'm even going to start even before the second grade example that you see on the screen. One of our preschool teachers, I always give her a shout out. Her name's Carrie Giles. She's awesome, even in our small little area. But she starts with 3 and 4 year olds. And just for anyone who's on here, that 3 and 4 year olds can do coding. And she has integrated it into her daily routine of mathematics. Let's code Bbot to find the number, or what's our letter of the day. Let's create our algorithm to get to that letter. And she's using the vocabulary. And that has been such a great thing to be able to co-teach with her and join her along that process. But now looking into the second grade example that you see here, another awesome teacher that I had the opportunity to co-teach with, we were taking so those standards you see there are for our state of Ohio, just story sequencing. And within the story sequencing unit, she said, what can we do to integrate tech? And I said, let's try to do some coding. The kids really love it. They get excited. And so we took one of the code.org lessons, which is a free curriculum that is available. And we took one of the unplugged lessons of sequencing, and the kids were doing unplugged activities. So you can see in the pictures there, hopefully, that unplugged just means no technology. It's just paper, pencil, and they were using cups. And the great thing is one student was the robot and one was the programmer, of course, and they had to write down on a scrap piece of paper their algorithm, which was a set of arrows telling their robot partner, how many different segments they needed to move the cup and create a cup stack tower. And the kids had no idea we were incorporating sequencing, and we were doing skip counting when they started to notice the patterns. And it was so cool to see so many different kids at different levels in this class excel where they may not excel in certain other areas. And that is always what stands out to me, is giving all kids this opportunity to shine and to show something that they are really good at, and find out that they are really good at something they didn't even know that existed out there. So this was part of it. And I think the next part of it shows the continuation of this lesson then. So when we go from this unplugged activity that you see here, on the next slide, it will show what takes them into the part of the plugged activity. So we're taking that plugged activity then where they learn that, hey, me drawing out these arrows, which is an algorithm, which was the process then my partner did to carry out stacking the cups, we can do something similar to that now using a computer. And we're moving blocks, so doing some block coding introduction with them, and then running their program or their algorithm and see if they need to debug and go from there. So it was a really awesome thing to do. And I know so many teachers right now are saying, how do I do this though if I'm remote? I don't have my kids in front of you like you're showing in the pictures there, kind of thing. And so I did put an example in there in the bottom right where you could use a platform called Seesaw. And there's many others out there, of course, you could utilize. But that's a sample of showing how the arrows that you see there would be the actions the kids would be doing to pick up the cup, to move it to the right to, and then to set it down. And then what they could do is snap a picture, and that picture that you see there should be that algorithm carried out in those steps, and it should create that cup stacking tower. So they can demonstrate their learning of the process and demonstrate to their teacher the process that they did. And they can also video record it too in Seesaw, which is really cool. So there's a lot of things out there and just some really great resources for educators and students to use for coding and computer science.
This looks like a lot of fun. And just to sort of recap, code.org was the website that you mentioned. They have a ton of different activities. Some are unplugged, some are plugged. This is a great example of, showing sequencing. And I love that you mentioned that, some students might think about coding even from a very young age and think like, oh, that sounds hard, or that I'm not good at that. And it's so amazing to do an activity where they don't even know that they're doing it and they're having so much fun. And, you can surprise them at the end by saying, congratulations, you just coded.
Yeah.
So here's a couple other activities I was hoping you could walk us through. I think, are these ones virtual or are they in-person activities?
So what is really great about a lot of these things, and really many things I like to share with teachers, is I'm thinking you can use it no matter what your situation. But Seesaw is one that you could utilize remotely. You could use it in hybrid. You could use it in person. And what is really neat about this is they are using a device. So they would have to have some sort of device like an iPad, a tablet, or a Chromebook, or a desktop computer, something like that. And some of the samples you see there are some gingerbread men one, coming up, of course, this Christmas time. But what's great is they're creating and just dragging the arrows in order to create their algorithm of how to get the gingerbread man safely, to the gingerbread house is one of them. Another one is actually creating and building a snowman. So once again, using those arrows to come up with your algorithm and then walk through kind of with your finger or explaining it to your teacher as you go. And the students can record their thought process as they go through that, just to see how they did on it. But the other ones that are in there, so Hello Ruby, of course, is one that you see in the bottom right. And then the one in the top left, How to Code It Sandcastle, especially when introducing computer science and coding to the younger students. I love to incorporate a storybook, language arts. A story will always grab their attention first. And what's great about those stories then is that you can carry it out into an activity that you could do all together on an interactive board. We could share it virtually over something like what we're doing here, and the students could tell you what directions they need to do. So there's so many different options that it doesn't matter what your situation, you can modify it, of course, and make it work. And the great thing again is Seesaw does have a free option. I always promote free things, of course, on there. So it is definitely something that has been very helpful for our teachers and for our students.
Great. And all of these activities are going to be linked in the slide deck, and we will share the slide deck with you so you can check them out as well. And I had something I was going to say, but I forgot it. So I'm sure I'll remember later.
Sounds great.
So how does incorporating computer science into other subjects improve student engagement? How have you seen it impact your students in that way?
The one thing I had kind of mentioned earlier too is, you are always, kind of just surprising your students and like, hey, today we're going to do this coding activity. And you're it's like a hidden way to teaching them the core standards that you're really covering there. And when you can get it into these other subjects, you really do. I know anyone that probably is on here listening, of course, could probably say the engagement is so different from the students. Like just even doing that unplugged activity with those second graders, they were way more engaged than if we were just doing a simple cut and paste, sequence the story into place. And we were teaching them a way different, variety of real world skills of what they're doing is sequencing as well. So when you can tie it into your, science and into social studies, they get so excited. It makes it more memorable for them. And the awesome thing is that they could go and teach it to someone else then, because they've made that connection now and they're able to demonstrate their learning in a way that they normally couldn't do, with just always, paper pencil or something like that. So it is really awesome to see how excited they get. I know when we did the Splats lesson with Lauren and Emily, when our kids had done that, right after we were done, the kids said to me, where do I buy one of those things? I want to do this at home. And when you have kids asking you to continue doing their learning at home when it's not even homework, to me, that is always really exciting to hear as an educator, that they want to continue on their own, which is fabulous.
Absolutely. And of course, that's music to our ears too. We love it. We love it when kids get excited about coding in general, and of course about Splats. And I think you touched on something here too, which is that there's so many different ways that coding can be integrated into different subjects. Just because a student isn't necessarily excited about math or about music, when you incorporate that coding aspect, that just gives them sort of another entry point. And when you're kind of mixing it all together, it really does increase that engagement. And I wonder if you can touch a little bit onto the sort of connection between coding and the real life skills, because I know something that, I probably said too when I was in high school learning about trigonometry and all these things. I'm like, I'm not going to use this, when I get out of school. So how is coding relating to that real life skills that students are going to need and will use all the time? And how do you sort of justify that to the teachers that you work with and the students that you're working with?
It's those life skills, I think, is what they're really walking away with. And you look at how our world has changed from some of us driving to work every day and then now being forced into, I'm just going to log into my meeting online. And so when we think about our kids and their future of what they're going to be exposed to, we don't know what the future holds, of course. But when we can say to them, I've given them that opportunity, they're working together with classmates, they're learning those core skills, how to collaborate, how to communicate with each other, how to problem solve successfully. And even through some of these processes, which is all involved in computer science and coding activities, is, you have to be able to problem solve. You can't just walk away and give up, so there's so many different parts of that. And then, just even going back to the sequence one, we took it so far as it was Halloween at the time, well, can you give us the steps? We introed it to, can you give us the steps to how would you carve a pumpkin? And so they started to see that, hey, these things that I'm doing at home are a sequence. And then when we talk about stories we read in class, the teacher had mentioned sequence. And now we're going to talk about coding and introduce them to new vocabulary terms and how that relates. And it really opens up their eyes and they're like, oh my gosh, I was a computer scientist today, or I was, a really awesome computer engineer putting these things together. And when you can give them that excitement, it's just going to make their future so different, I think, as long as you can provide that opportunity. And that's all we can do is provide, the opportunity to help them be successful adults in the future.
That immediate reaction, when you've coded something and, maybe there's a bug in it and it's not working, or it works right away. Like as soon as you see that light up or that thing happen that you were trying to do, it's sort of that immediate feedback. And it is sort of empowering because you can see how you're able to control the code and you're writing the rules. So I think that's one thing that we definitely hear from students that they love about coding. And I remembered what I was going to say, and that is when you were talking about mixing coding with reading and literacy, I think that's one thing that surprised me the most, because what we see at Unruly Splats, a lot of the educators that we work with, some of them are library media specialists. And I was sort of confused at first. I'm like, oh, but oftentimes that's the intro to engineering and computer science. And they are using, Splats and other coding tools to make their storytelling interactive. And I just thought that was so amazing. So I think that's really cool how, teachers who are teaching literacy and things that you might not think of as related to coding are incorporating that into their lessons.
Absolutely.
All right, so moving on, you touched on, this is the perfect sort of segue into collaboration, because you mentioned that coding does get your students collaborating. So how do you encourage that collaboration with computer science?
So, one of the first things, of course, that all educators usually do is somehow model that. So you definitely have to model what that would look like in your classroom, especially now it looks a little different sometimes. So how are they going to collaborate if they can't sit next to each other, kind of thing. We can't shut across the room and all those things. Some of the programs that are out there, some different things is we've used pair programming before. So just like you saw those kids on the floor, they could be distance and they could still be communicating with each other, where one person is coming up with the plan or the algorithm and then the other one is acting it out. So using a pair programming method has been really helpful for our kids. But also any type of group work or teamwork goes well beyond just computer science. It's, built into everything, as we had mentioned, for their future. So encouraging that, is, some kids will say, well, I already know this, and they'll take off with it and they'll just want to work on their own. And I think it's important to kind of take those kids that may be excelling in it and have them be the teacher of the class then, to show the other students, this is how you do that. So give them a role, of course, so that way they can demonstrate that. Get the other kids asking questions and pausing with a pair share kind of thing so they can talk about what they're learning. But I think it's such a huge part so our students can learn how to communicate successfully with one another and, talk about and debug and come up with any differences they may find. Because that's the other part of computer, very like math, is there's not one set way to figure out a problem always. There can be more than one way. And that's really eye-opening to the kids when you say, well, that's great, you figured it out that way, but it also works the way that our friend over here figured it out. So it's a really neat way to get them talking and discussing.
And just for anybody who hasn't heard of pair programming, what is that?
So pair programming is when you are partnered up with someone else, and you could be virtual and do this as well. So this can work again in all aspects. And one person is the navigator. So they're the one that is actually doing the driving of, the mouse or the cursor on the computer. And then the other person is the one that is giving the directions. So I always think of it like a GPS almost, your phone is giving you the directions, but then, carrying it out, you're the one that's driving and following them. So that's kind of how it works. And then you can swap roles. So you always need to swap roles so each kid gets an opportunity, to be either the driver or the navigator.
Yeah, and we love this technique at Unruly too. And you touched on something too. It just gives the opportunity for students to teach each other and to have those roles and give them that empowerment. Is such a wonderful thing. One of my favorite stories from an educator that we work with was when they were building their own fitness game. This was pre-COVID, but a student came up to his desk and said, "Oh, I don't know how to make a delay in the timer," because they were building a timer. And he said, "Oh, well, I don't really know how to do that either. We haven't gotten to that part yet in the tutorials. So why don't you see if you can figure it out, dig a little bit more, and then I'll come back and we can figure it out together." And he said it was like, less than 5 minutes later, she was like, "I figured it out." And then she got to teach the whole class how to use this delay block. And I thought that was such a cool moment, where here the student gets to teach the rest of the class something, which is not always, not always common. So I think that computer science definitely provides those opportunities because there's always something to learn.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So this is a photo from when we taught a virtual class to your students. I think I have a video to go along with this, but do you want to kind of describe what's happening here?
Sure. So this was at a time when we were hybrid. So this was about half our third graders that we had in a class. And it was really great. Lauren and Emily were virtual with us, hence the cord connected to the laptop there in the room. But walking the kids through block programming using the Unruly Splats app, and they had just had very little block coding experience from Hour of Code's, previous years. And so they were really excited to dive into how to program those splats that you see in the corner and actually carry out then an activity. So this was 4 corners that the kids were playing. And so they had to do some movement, and it got them up, it got them excited. And I really did see when I was there, kind of watching the kids as they were doing this, those kids, again, that may not be super excited about a certain subject, that they were like, "Oh, this is totally different than what we do in this class right now," and it really sparked their interest, and they were ready to go with it. And they wanted to do it, of course, the next few days too. But I'll let you share the video you have for this one then, Lauren.
For sure. It was a lot of fun, and we're going to get into what splats are. But I think the rules for the game were that everybody hopefully knows the game 4 corners. The 4 corners light up a certain color, and then everyone has to choose a corner, and then at random, one of the corners, the light turns off, and then whoever was in that corner has to do, instead of elimination, we said, okay, you have to do 5 jumping jacks. So that's what the kids are doing right now. So I'm about to show a video here of what that looked like.
Oh, I keep passing. All right, go back.
Again.
Should we do it again for you guys?
Yeah. Yeah, do it for
You ready?
1 million more times.
Okay, get ready. Go.
I'm staying.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And which one went off? Oh! 5 jumping jacks. All right.
They had so much fun. I loved seeing that video. Awesome. We think we also played another game. Yeah, we played four corners and red light, green light, which we'll go over later in the presentation. But collaboration is easier when they're in person. Can you walk us through a couple ideas for virtual collaboration?
Absolutely. So if you are looking for another way to kind of get your kids talking with you and coming up with the steps to program, different things, Bbot has a virtual emulator now. And it is really cool to see. I actually have a teacher use this today when I walked into her classroom because of our shields and our desks and the kids having to stay in their seat. They can't come to the carpet anymore. And so she's using this in person, but you could definitely, put this on your screen and share it. And what's great is you don't even have to have the Bbot robot there. And many of these look very similar, but you come up with the algorithm that you'll see at the bottom, talk to the kids, they get to share it. And then once again, you hit go, which is your run program. And then from there, they can actually see it carried out. So the link, as Lauren had said, these are all linked within the slide deck, which is really cool. So if you're wondering where it is, you can find that. And then Jamboard has become one of my favorite new tools to use for everyone. And so the example you see there is just taking an unplugged, it was another code.org unplugged lesson. But if your students are not able to have paper, you're not able to get them packets or any sort in that sense, you could do a Jamboard with them where they could either have access to edit it with you, or you could just have them tell you the steps again and say, hey, there's the flurb. He loves to eat his fruit that you see there. So what direction is the flurb going to have to go to eat that fruit? And so they'll all say up, and they'll shout at you and you say up, and then you can go ahead and circle that one. And then there's other parts of it that I made interactive where they can actually then move the flurb around. So lots of really cool things you can do with Jamboard. It's almost like Google Slides, but just a much easier way for younger kids to even, edit it and collaborate with you and your students as well. So some really awesome other tools out there.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And it's nice that they have the virtual option. Companies are getting so creative now with allowing their tools to be used online. I think it's great. All right. And then second to last question here, what sort of tips do you have for teachers who are new to coding? There might be some people on the line who think that coding is scary, because it is kind of scary. So what tips do you have if you're brand new to coding to get started?
I hear this all the time, and especially when I send out to our staff, hour of code is this week, they're like, I have no idea what computer science is or what coding is. But here's the great thing about all this. So anyone that's on here, you do not have to have a degree in computer science. You do not have to have, a certificate of knowing how to do CS, of any of that sort. What's great about this is just that whole mindset to open up your mind and say, I'm going to just try to let my kids do some of these activities. And this is what's great. Kind of like what Lauren was saying with the teacher said, I don't know how to do that either. Kids will eat that up when they know that they're going to teach you or you're going to learn together. It gives them motivation. It gives them that excitement. And what's great is that you're learning right along with the students, and it shows them that us as educators are constantly learning as well. So you do not have to be the know-all of all these different tools out there, and you don't have to be expert in computer science and coding. You can learn right along with your students, and all of the different opportunities that are out there for teachers and students to try out these. Hour of Code this week is a great week to start that even. And just give your kids some of the chances to try it and let them teach you. Let them come up in front of the class. So my big push is just be willing to try something new. And then you might find out that, hey, this actually went really well and I want to continue it with my kids. And they loved it too.
Yeah, exactly. And it is sort of that setting by example too. We talk about that a lot at Unruly, but if you want your students to try something new and take risks and not be afraid, the best way to get your students to do that is to do it yourself. And chances are you're going to have a lot of fun doing it too.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And speaking of Hour of Code, what are your plans? What are you and your teachers and students all doing for Hour of Code? What's the plan?
So this was a really cool thing. So I challenged our teachers in our district just to be willing again, and gave them some different choice boards as options, and just said, hey, I challenge you to send this out there to your students. Sometimes I know it's a little nerve-wracking, and they'll say, oh, I don't know if I can do that. But I've already had teachers, it's only Wednesday of this week, and I've had teachers message me and say, hey, could you come in tomorrow? I have a middle school teacher, and I'm really excited to work with her. And we're going to be doing some Google CS First projects, actually involving language arts. So another tool out there is Scratch. So I'm excited about that. And, I had another teacher say, well, I use Codable with my kids, and they taught me how to do that. So once again, my challenge is always just try one new thing, learn one new thing that you're willing to take back. And if that's just picking something like a choice board and providing that for your kids, or trying out, Splats or whatever that is, just giving them that opportunity. So I'm excited to see what they all do by the end of the week, and hopefully they share their photos to my shared photo album so we can promote those and share them out with everyone.
Nice. I'm excited. How many of your classes are participating in Hour of Code? Or is it everybody?
Well, it's probably not going to be everybody, of course, but we do try, of course. Every year, one year we did get really, really set up in advance, and had our specials teachers all doing something. So music and art and gym were all participating. I think this year, because it is such a different year for everyone, it's more everyone's on their own, but we are collaborating together as a district, to see what they can do. And once again, that's the thing. We just want to try and get, one more person on board, just like giving the kids opportunities. Let's get as many people as we can, and let's continue to move forward. That's the big thing with any of this, is continue moving forward and learning together.
Yes, absolutely. And there's so many amazing Hour of Code resources out there. Most of them are free on code.org. And I know if you go on Twitter and search the hashtag Hour of Code, you'll just see a ton of different things. It's actually really fun to do. So definitely recommend everybody, if you have Twitter, search the hashtag Hour of Code, and I'm sure there'll be some really fun ideas to check out. And I love seeing the photos too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that leads me to just give a little intro to Splats, which are what you saw in the video here. So this year we're doing an activity for Hour of Code, so I'll get into that later. But Splats are these really fun programmable floor buttons that students can code to light up and make sounds, and they keep track of time. So there's a built-in timer in there. And you can use them in person to create games like relay races and whack-a-mole and obstacle courses, but you can also use them virtually for activities. You can see on the iPad there in the left-hand side, those are virtual splats, and they react just the same as physical splats. And so what's great about it is you have that screen time component, but then you also have that time away from the screen where students are being physically active. So we're all about mixing physical activity and active play with the coding. And we've seen this in PE classes and music classes. So I'm about to go into a couple different examples of lessons and activities that we've seen. But that is what they look like. So actually, before I show off our virtual platform, I'm going to show a quick video of Splats. Awesome. So you can see lots of the kids there. One of the games that they were playing in there was the Race in Place, which is a fan favorite where you have to press it as many times as you can with your feet. That's always a popular one. So we actually just ran a virtual challenge, the Fall Fitness Challenge, where students had to create stopwatches and timers, and they could do their physical activity from home. So, for example, how many jumping jacks can you do in 10 seconds? And then, repeating that over and over to see if you can beat your last score. And kids are naturally, a lot of them are very competitive and in a good way. And so they're like, oh, I can beat my next score. And so it really is really motivating for students to be able to sort of combine that technology and the physical activity. So we have a virtual app, as I mentioned. This is sort of what it looks like. It works on iPads and Chrome browser. So if you have any laptop or Chromebooks, work with it. It's super fun and easy to use. We've got some tutorials. We've got some pre-built games, which are great for just getting started. And then we always encourage students to modify the games because a lot of times students are way more creative than we are, and they come up with really, really fun games. In fact, many of the games that are built into our app actually came from student or teacher ideas. So we love hearing from students and teachers about, games that they've created or ideas that they have. So I'll go into the app in a little bit just to give a tour. So here is one game, red splat, green splat. So we missed a little bit earlier, but when it's red, you're running towards the splat, or when it's red, you're stopped. And when it's green, you're running towards the splat. And so our virtual modification for this was getting students, if you share your screen, getting students to race in place when it's green on the screen and make a silly pose and stop when it's red. And I think we did this in your class as well, Christine, because there wasn't a large space. And so splats can be very flexible, even if you are in person with students in a small space. Do you remember which one was their favorite game, Christine?
I think they really liked the four corners the most, but that's just because we didn't have quite enough room to run in the room that we were in to do red splat, green splat. But they loved that one too. It didn't matter. They just were excited to get up and get moving and see if their programs worked that they did.
Yeah, four corners is a fan favorite, that's for sure. So this is a great one when we're talking about incorporating coding into other subjects. This is a great one for, grade level subjects or PE, anything that, involves the full class. This is full class play. You don't need to, have students break off into groups and do their own thing. You can play as a full class with this game, which I really love about it. We also have Vote Splats. So this is a virtual activity that we created in November during election month. It's really fun. We have different characters which represent different colors of the splats, and the activity actually goes through different types of voting. So there's simple voting, there's electoral college voting, and then there's ranked choice voting, which was on the ballot actually in Massachusetts for this year. And what's great about this activity is that regardless of the code, so the same code is used for all three different versions of the voting activities, but you do get different results based on the method. So it's just a really fun way to incorporate civics and learning about the elections and how voting works with coding. And so sort of how it works here is when the program starts, all the different characters represent a different color. So you're lighting up the splats. And then when each splat is pressed, it lights up gold to see that it's been counted. It makes a funny sound, a pop sound, and it changes the score by 1. Yes, Anthony, you're right. It is great for social studies, and it's really fun and interactive. And so if you're fully virtual, it's just a great way for, the kids can put their hands up and you can count their vote. And if you're in person, you can actually have them stomp on the splat to record that vote. So this was actually one of my favorite ones. I think secretly, we played this as a team on one of our team calls, and I think many of the people on our team weren't really sure how ranked choice voting actually worked. We thought that we knew, but then after we played the game, we were so much more confident in how ranked choice voting actually worked. So it was kind of a fun activity for us to do as well as a team. And then this one is my favorite, Found Art Challenge. So how this game works, this is great if you're doing an art class or if you're doing a PE class virtually. This is also a great game. So how the code works is the splat is going to light up a different color, and then there's going to be a verbal countdown, and the color represents a color in your house of an item that you need to go run and go get. So say it lights up blue, then I have 60 seconds to run around the house and find something blue. I'll take my phone case and bring it back to my desk. And that happens, depending on the code that you write, it could happen 4 or 5 times. So then by the end, students will have 4 or 5 items of different colors at their desk. And then you have 60 seconds to put your sculpture together. So this is what some of our students came up with from around the house. So I'll show you what this looks like in our code. So this is what it looks like. As you can see here, we've got some functions and some variables, which is exciting. And how it works is when the program starts, you can see there's 2 ways to start a program. Either you press the splat or you run the program. And you run the program, one splat is going to light blue and one splat is going to light green. And then when we press splat 1, a 20-second countdown timer is going to start. It's going to light the splats with a random color, and that's what's going to indicate what color of item that we should grab from around the house. And so you just keep pressing splat 1 however many times you want for students to, and it'll light up a different color. So I'll show you what that looks like. I'm going to run the program. Gonna light the splats up, green and blue, perfect. And I'm gonna press splat 1. And it lights up purple. And it's counting down from 20. I'm gonna stop it because that's a long time to hear that. But you can change this so that it's not a countdown timer of 20. It could be a countdown timer of 5. Or 10, or however many you want. And that's the beauty of coding, is you can control it. So that's Found Art Challenge. That one's one of my favorites because it gets students up and moving, but it's also creative. And then I think the last one that I'm going to go through here is musical splats. So this one's really fun and a great way to incorporate functions, actually, but it uses something called MIDI, where there's a number assigned to a note, and that's how you code the splats to play a certain note. And so students can start out by making a drum machine, which is a little bit more simple. And this lesson plan that we have here kind of goes through different steps, and it gets a little bit more builds on the different challenges. And so soon at the end, students will be able to create their own songs. And we saw one student created an Imagine Dragon song, which is pretty amazing. So I'll show you a video of what this looks like. So I'll show you a drum machine first, and then I'll show you a Twinkle Twinkle.
Hi guys! So today I'm going to be testing out my Splats drum recording, and I'm going to show you guys what it is and how I made it. Let's test it.
This was a grade 2 student, just to give you a sense for the age. And it was a very catchy beat, I will say. And she was very excited about her drum machine. And I was really impressed with what she came up with. And so then that's the first challenge. And then the next challenge in that activity pack is to play Twinkle Twinkle. So here's what one student came up with. And that was a short one, but I liked it because they incorporated different musical instruments into it. So they could code the whole song, or they could code a certain aspect of it and break it up. But I thought that was one of the more creative renditions of it. Perfect. And finally, we did allude to our hour of code activity. So we're basing it all around quests this year. And so very similar to the rest of our activities, it starts off with just getting to know the Unruly app, really, really basic, and then it builds in the different blocks that you'll need to use. And so by the end, students will have created a stopwatch, and they'll get to create their own game with that stopwatch. And the first quest is for them to draw a hybrid animal, which you will get a name of when you first sign up for the Unruly app. And so it's just kind of getting students really creative and using their drawing skills, which is something they can do from home. And then they get to be introduced to the coding blocks as well. And this is all done through a slide deck, which we will link in the chats that you can see. You can see exactly how the activity works. And if you would be interested in a free trial, feel free to reach out to us and request that on our website. After this webinar, you'll be directed to a request a call form. And so if you have a quick chat with us, then we will give you your username and password for a trial and show you exactly how the app works. And so the quest is really creative. We tried to make it as fun as possible and as silly as possible for kids. So we based it all around Unruly Island, and different characters will lead you through each quest. And you'll notice that the characters are the same as the Boat Splats activity pack. So it's just a really fun way to get students excited about what they're going to be doing for the next quest, and kind of lead them along the way of that journey. And you can choose to do part of the quest or the whole quest. It's very flexible, and it is open for both virtual and in person. Awesome. So that's all we have for you today. I'm going to do a quick few wrap-up slides, but if you're interested in learning more, check us out on unrulysplats.com. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Would love to hear some of your questions for either myself or for Christine. Write us in the chat or go to the Q&A section. If you have any questions for us, we'd love to answer them for you. Awesome. And I know we're running low on time, so awesome. Glad to hear there's some school librarian in the audience. That's wonderful. We work with a ton of librarians, and they're some of the most creative people we work with in terms of figuring out different ways to collaborate across the school. That's one thing I didn't mention, but library media specialists and technology integration specialists are sort of the conduit to collaboration, not only for students, but also for teachers. So we love seeing when our teachers are collaborating. And one of the most common ones we see is the PE teachers collaborating with the librarians or the technology teachers. So that's music to our ears when we hear about teachers collaborating as well.
Totally agree.
Last but not least, thanks for joining us. And thank you to Christine for taking the time today to impart her knowledge. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here.